In Korea, before a showing of any kind, you say 잘 부탁합니다. This translates into please be kind to me. But I always liked it because it suggests even if I shame myself, please be kind to me. I never planned for a memoir. When I completed all 49 translations of my mother's letters, along with a 2-page introduction, I sent out a book of translations and received a polite and kind rejection from every publisher. I got the same response. The letters were not special in and of themselves. They were special because of the context of the letters in the 2-page introduction. They said, if you could turn these 2 pages into 200 pages, it might one day be a book. Shortly after that, in 2017, I was invited to speak at the Asian Educators Alliance in San Francisco. It was one of my better talks because I was coming to it fresh from rejection. Rejection that was so thorough and complete. There was nothing left. I was empty, and I was sitting on a high stool at the front of the room. At that moment, I never told anyone everything. I started from the beginning, here. When I was 14, my father got a job offer in South Korea. The next year, he took the offer, and my parents both moved to Seoul. They moved me from San Jose to live with my brother, who was 4 years older. He was 19, in a house in Davis. The contract for my father's job was 3 years. And as a family, I think we believed it would just be these 3 years. Then it became 5 years, 7 years, then 9 years before I reunited with them. During the years apart, I developed a severe eating disorder. I was bullied at school if I didn't skip it that day, and I attempted my life regularly because I thought at the time, why not? But my mother would write me letters every week. At the time, I couldn't read Korean the way I can now, and I would discard them out of anger. Years later, when I reunited with my parents, I found in a box 49 of my mother's letters. By then, I was a poet, and you might never have guessed a translator. But I remember one teacher, Eamon Grennan, telling me, if you want to be a poet, write poetry. If you want to be a great poet, then translate. When I found the letters, I still didn't know what to do with them. So I showed them to a mentor, Don-Mi Che. I remember she said to me, you found 49 letters? And she told me, in Buddhist tradition, 49 is the number of days your soul wanders the earth looking for answers before the afterlife. I'd love to read you one of the first letters I read to anybody. It's the letter I read that day in front of the room. In the letter, my mother calls me Unji, my Korean name. She uses a kitty diction so I can better understand her, and she uses an English dictionary for advanced vocabulary, putting in the sort of first English definition showing up. Hello, Unji? I was so happy after we talked on the phone this morning. Seemed like you were in a better mood too. Thank you for singing my favorite song for me. I nearly cried. Sing for me again next time. I love to hear Unji's voice anytime. Sure, it's not easy for a person to live their life. For adults or babies, it's all the same. Our feelings are different because our thoughts are different, because our wants are different. Actually, everyone's the same. Our sadness, sometimes our joy, our hopelessness, despair. Mommy's like that too. When you're my age, you think you'll outgrow everything, but it's not true. Every day my thoughts change and I lose control. However, Unji, our lives being given to us is the most precious time. Of course, the ups and downs go together, but let's not waste any moment not feeling happy, not being happy. If anyone asks for help, be willing to reach out your hand. If anyone needs guidance, you do so earnestly, with honesty. You know penguins? Penguins support each other with order, discipline. Mommy read this in a book, and she will copy it word for word. When penguins in the South Pole endure frigid, very cold winds, they huddle tightly together with their body heat. The penguins on the side with raging winds will alternate with the penguins in the back where there is almost no wind. The penguins all abide by this rule. If some penguins try to remain only in the back, then it will be difficult for them to survive themselves. Do you understand? Working together, you are much stronger. You can't only help others either. When you're having a hard time, tell somebody. If you want to throw a tantrum, you should try it. I'm not sure what to say to help Unji, but from Mommy's point of view, you're doing very, very well. Unji has grown to be successful and good-hearted, more than what Mommy hoped for. Everything is a process. Everything passes. Let's always try to live with a bright, beaming heart. Mommy too. Unji too. I love you, my Unji. Your songs. Thank you so very much for them. Reading this letter now, I remember the first time I couldn't get through most of this. I was sort of shaking and crying so hard I needed help, and it was just the perfect place to be with others who sort of gave me the strength to read that letter. And so being able to read through it now with you is a new experience. So at the start of 2016, and that was a year before I'd arrived in San Francisco, I had quit writing. I'd been working on my poems and the translations of my mother's letters, but I thought it was going to kill me to keep going. My writing was going to come at the cost of my life. If I could only live without writing, then I ought to try it. So that same night, I took to Twitter and posted that I would write 1,000 love letters to strangers instead. If they told me a bit about themselves and sent their address, I would handwrite and post them a love letter. I went to sleep. In the morning, I had requests from all over the world: Australia, South Korea, Indonesia, South Africa, France, Canada, and even across the road from where I was staying. Writing was not the thing. It was the thing to get me to the real thing, and that was human connection. I learned I could live without writing, but I could not live without human connection. I'd given up on the poems and translations for 6 months, a long time for me, but it was the most important time for my writing. After my talk in San Francisco, where I spoke frankly about rejection and shared the letter, those who listened approached me to say they could hear their own mothers. They could hear the Korean. And through them, I heard my mother. I went home and started over. Today, if you look at the memoir, it's almost exactly 200 pages. The 2-page introduction became the breath of the memoir, but it would take me 7 years to complete the magical language of others, 9 years to complete A Lesser Love. And for the letters, last week I posted my 180th love letter. I'd love to share a poem from A Lesser Love. It's called To My Mother, Kneeling in the Cactus Garden. For a month, I tried to think of what to say. How many times you've swept a kitchen knife across your neckline and said, "This is how you end a marriage." How many more wicks you light for God. I could tell by your eyes you've never seen him. What would you call the feeling of abandon and caution and relief that keeps me tethered to you? Let me be the husband you prayed for, the son you wanted, or mother who held you. I'll build your new patio swing and fold your coffee linens, wash your hardened feet in warm water. To me, you have become a prison of its own light. I'll grow greens in the parsley you love and wrap them into cold sandwiches. I will place them where you can reach with ease. Today, my research at the University of Washington is for the single task of translating one so-called untranslatable word, the culturally and historically specific Han. Han is often described as a Korean form of grief or sorrow. In conversation at the dinner table at home, for example, it's a rock that contracts and grows heavy in one's heart. But it's also the trauma experienced by a country or a people from historical oppression. It's an accumulation of sadness over time. Han can cause physical symptoms like dizziness and heart palpitations. In Washington, D.C., just this year, I was talking about Han at a reading, and somebody came up afterward to say that Even hearing me say the word over and over made his heart quiver in pain. Mira Lee, a professor of Asian American studies, says, "It's not that Han is unique to Korean culture. After all, it can be universally felt. But it's that Korean society developed a language to express such a word as Han. Han is also a national characteristic of Korea. A word like freedom bears weight in this country. Han bears weight for Korea. I see Han as a gap between the moment of trauma and the possibility of reparation." I wanted to share this passage where I'm working out the feeling of Han. Han is the gap which cannot be closed. It is the severing of an intimate bond that cannot be repaired. It is hollowness that spurns rage and ferments bitterness. It is the untended, the unresolvable, emptiness, desertedness, abandonment. It is an oppressive sadness for the past. It is the rejection of a cure. To have Han is to be a child who hoped to be loved in a manner she understood, but accepts any love, even in the form of terrible pain, because pain cannot lessen a hope for love. Yesterday, I was asked a question for an interview in Seattle, and I just thought it was so wonderful. They asked me, "What is the brightest future you can imagine?" All my work with Han is to arrive at another word, Chung. For a bright future, a future of Chung comes to mind, another untranslatable word. Chung is the Korean for a bond, attachment, or love for a person, place, or thing. Though the word is Korean, the feeling of Chung is also universal, shared. That Chung we have for one another, or for the land we live on, and the everyday things, the coffee mug, the notebook, and the chair, reflecting to us the values we admire, such as goodwill, steadfastness, and service, values we hope to mirror with care. Chung is the umbilical cord between us and life. I was asked to recommend some books, and there's so many I'd recommend, but a few are DMZ Colony by poet and translator Don Che, who I mentioned, The Korean War by historian Bruce Cummings, and The Future of Silence, translated by Bruce and Ju-Chan Fulton. It's a collection of contemporary fiction by Korean women, and I hope you get to check it out. Lastly, I'd like to thank you and end our time with a reading from the memoir. One part of the memoir follows my maternal grandparents, Jun and Lee, and their lives in Daejeon in South Korea. But another follows my paternal grandmother, Kumiko, who was born and raised in Tokyo, Japan. At the age of 19, Kumiko found out she was Korean. Her parents had fled to Japan from the atrocities of the occupation. Her family then fled Japan and returned to Jeju Island, where a campaign of South Korean police officers backed by the US was launched to suppress the islanders. And this was before the Korean War, just before. Kumiko and her parents hid in a mountain on Jeju, but her mother asked her father to go down and check on their friends and family. Kumiko begged her father not to go. She begged her mother not to let him. He hadn't returned when Kumiko and her mother finally go looking. When Kumiko and her mother came down the mountain, the island was scorched. They passed through burnt villages, their voices lodged in their throats. Many of the dead could not be found, their bodies tossed over cliffs, hidden away in caves, or chopped into bits, signs of covering up. Mothers cupped the air with their hands, holding the missing faces of their husbands and sons. Their wailing and screaming filled the hearts of all who sifted through the remains. Teeth, hair, dead horses and pigs, and mosquitoes. The smoke reddened the sun. They covered their mouths, or they would taste the corpses. There were children, the girls Kumiko played with, and women and men lying with the limbs bent over each other, splayed across the road. Tens of thousands of them, idle along collapsed terraces where the islanders once danced, pumping with life. It was Kumiko who crossed the road over a bridge and came to a part of the ground soaked in blood. When she asked after her father, somebody pointed to this ground. She saw nothing except the many faces around her, mouths wide and sullen. One islander, a grandmother, said to her, "Your father was captured at the bottom of the mountain and dragged into a demonstration." She explained that a demonstration was a public display. A group of men, unfed and irate, corralled a crowd together. They put on such displays on behalf of the country and on higher orders foregoing restraint. What evil was born out of demonstration? Then where is he? Kumiko asked. The grandmother opened her palm toward the ground. Here. Looking closer, flesh and bone, gristle mistaken for bark and debris between the stones. At once the road became vivid, and she recognized her father. Road. Father. Road. They stoned him until he was gravel, the grandmother said, as though she were not speaking to Kumiko, but a deity who had come down from the mountain to judge her for the truth. Many of us stoned him to prove our innocence. We stoned our own again and again. They stoned him overnight. They pitched blunt rocks harder over days for sport until finally boredom, before the body was pulverized. What was exchanged between the police and the groups of men and the islanders, between the rocks and the bones, between the body and the road? What was supposed to be understood? Though they did not know it, The days that Kumiko and her mother spent hiding on the mountain were given a name. Such were the questions raised by the Jeju Island massacre of April 3rd, 1948. Thank you.